Hello, we're live. All right, so hi, my name's Bobby. I'm the reference assistant here at the McAllen Public Library. I'd like to welcome everybody to the 2020 South Texas Book Festival. So this is our 7th edition and our very first virtual festival. And it's also the first time we'll be featuring children's, teen, and adult authors. So tonight's program is titled Poetry and Wine, an Evening of Literature. And I'm joined by a very, very special guest, Emmy Perez. Hello, Emmy.
Hello.
Hi. So let me just kind of give a little intro here, and then we can get right to it. So I'm going to go ahead and read this just so I don't miss anything, okay? Emmy Perez teaches at UTRGV. She was a recipient of the National Endowment for the Arts Poetry Fellowship in 2017. She's also a fellow and organizing committee member of the Canto Mundo and is a longtime member of Macondo, a writer's workshop. She is best known for her collections With the River on Our Face and Solstice. She received the 2009 Alfredo Cisneros del Moral Award for her writing, an award that was started by Sandra Cisneros. Previously, she received the James D. Phelan Literary Award from the San Francisco Foundation. In 2019, she was named the Poet Laureate for Texas for 2020. And hello, Emmy, again. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for hosting us.
Awesome. Thank you
Yeah.
for joining us tonight. It's a very special evening. Of course, tonight we kick off the South Texas Book Festival. And why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself, anything that I might have missed or you want to go ahead and let us know. And then we can let us know what you're going to plan on reading, and so we can jump right to it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Bobby. And just thank you to everybody who's involved in this enormous effort of putting the South Texas Book Festival together. I have loved going to this festival for several years now with my children. And I'm glad that it's expanding into having an adult reading tonight. And thank you so much for the invite. And I want to begin by acknowledging the native land that we live on, and just thanking the original caretakers of this land, this beautiful land here in the Valley. I live in McAllen, and so I love my library. So thank you all for the invite. I don't know if you want me to begin with the poem.
Whatever you feel more comfortable doing, that's fine. Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with.
Okay, so I've been reading this poem a lot during the pandemic because it reminds me of the times when we are not living in a pandemic. And I feel like it just helps me to remember how much I love living in the Valley. And it even travels to Corpus Christi too, so beyond the Valley as well. And just my gratitude for living in this land. I'm from Santana, California originally, but I've lived in the Texas borderlands for 20 years now, and McAllen for 14 years now. So this piece is from my collection With the River on Our Face, and it's called Green Light Go. To be a disco ball dangling in a storefront window in the sun with a cage on it. To be 2 and 3 disco balls downtown McAllen, spangles of sun and water that grew tangerine skins late February, pink bottle brush nostrils, buff-bellied hummingbirds. To be mirrors and hexagonal combs, Mexican honey wasps, larvae, paper, wax. To make geometry without vocabulary, to be live music. Take off your jacket, girl. Wear your tank top. It's 90 degrees. To be a green light go downtown Corpus after cars and trucks zooming on beach sand before hot tubs. To be an orange sun driving from Gloria Anzaldua's grave. To be a cactus bloom fuchsia, a puncha, Laguna Atascosa, Laguna Madre. To be a watering hole, a mud chimney air vent for crawdad water tunnels. To be a silver lizard run over by tires, a swatch of river on asphalt. To be a bolt loosened from the border wall. to be a peso falling out of the border crossing's revolving slot, to be a Coke bottle dove, a Mexican Coca-Cola, a cooing quorum of Loteria cards signing a resolution, to be a goose perched on top of an abandoned sink in a yard in a town that fords the river. The woman stretched on her beloved's grave returned after decades. To be a kid in juvie, to be her guardian, the judge, the probation officer, to be the letters she writes, the words that matter more than food, almost as much as music and more than makeup, nearly sun seen through the mandatory skylight, imagined by the control room monitor, to be El Chalan, the last hand-drawn ferry on the river, its ropes pulled by pilots, to be a passenger almost on the other side.
That was really wonderful. That was a great poem. So I believe we are going to be joined now by Jose. Hello, Jose.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. Okay, let me see here. So let me go ahead and introduce Jose. Let's see. It's Jose Antonio Rodriguez, whose work includes The Shallow End of Sleep, Backlit Hour, House Built on Ashes, and This American Autopsy. His work has appeared in The New Yorker, The New York Times Magazine, The Nation, McSweeney's, Poetry, Patterson's Literary Review, and Latin American Literature Today, among other publications. How are you doing, Jose?
I'm great.
So you caught the last part there of Emmy's poem?
I did. I got all her poem, yeah, which is a beautiful poem, of course, yeah.
It's very beautiful. Yes, so I did forget to mention we will be taking questions and comments. So if our viewers out there who have anything they want to ask or comment on any of the poetry, go ahead and leave it down in the comments, and we will be picking, as time allows, a couple of questions near the end. And so if you want, go ahead and leave those down in the comments area. Yeah, so Jose, why don't we go? We're just going to bounce back and forth, if that's okay with you all. Why don't you go ahead and give us a little introduction about yourself and what you plan on sharing with us tonight?
Sure. I'm coming at you guys from Edinburgh, Texas, which is right next to McAllen. For those of you who are tuning in from far away, McAllen is where I grew up. Edinburgh is where I work now. A lot of my writing deals with this area and tries to understand it and explore its complexity. I'm going to read mainly from my latest book, This American Autopsy, and then if there's time or if I can work it out somehow, maybe a little bit of prose from the memoir, House Built on Ashes. But I'll start with this poem that is also autobiographical, and it's called Challenger. Anyway, let me just read. Yeah. Challenger. Someone knocked at the door and we all turned our heads. The Challenger exploded, the principal said. The astronauts are dead. Turn on your TV. The newscaster is solemn with his perfect hair. You cannot see the astronauts in the image. You cannot hear them. They are tiny inside that huge ship that itself looks tiny inside the TV screen. I think this is supposed to be sad, but I can't picture the astronauts dying. Can't even picture their tiny screams. They were excited, then they weren't. Like every night when I lie in bed, mumbling the chores for the following day until I don't, though I don't know when. The news keeps airing the video like a drill, and like a drill, we learn it. The shuttle then resembling a toy, a flying saucer, rising into the blue until it transformed into a cloud of white, foamy streams like firecracker snakes that reached the edge and were gone.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I mean, again, we're gonna have pretty much a very loose way that we're gonna be working tonight. So we're just gonna go back and forth. So as soon as one's done, Emmy, if you can just go ahead and start with your next one. Yeah.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to read an excerpt from a longer piece called El Paso, El Valle. And 20 years ago, I moved to El Paso, where my mom is from. And 14 years ago, I moved to El Valle. So the poem is like half about El Paso, half about El Valle. I'm just going to read the part about El Valle. And it ends with a quote in Spanish by Garcia Lorca.
Okay.
And I just love this place. And so I think that the images kind of show that love. El Valle of yellow kiskities and green-blue river. El Valle, where Agent Orange was born in a factory planted in the barrio. DDT and arsenic still in the soil and blood. El Valle, where I'm learning how to love astonished. El Valle, a brand new border, walls, concrete, rebar, comfort for those who have never touched this river water. El Valle, where we are witnesses with all the senses, sometimes the words swallowed in helicopters and hurricanes. El Valle of green parakeets on 10th Street, bobcats and ghosts of ocelots in the Monte by Boca Chica, where the river cools blue herons, children, and fisher women and men as it joins the Gulf. Spring arrives anytime there's a splash of rain with sun, and still a pronounced flowering in February, March. Cacti blooming fuchsia flowers near salt water, and Texas tortoise so fucking ancient at Laguna Atascosa, walking in wind as we walk in wind, in spring, thinking about desire, and female and male cardinals in winter. El Valle, where my toronjas are organic and the big red ants consume every last peach white bit of pulp when stray beautiful ones fall to dirt already with the suck hole for the birds. El Valle, where each toronja in my backyard is a miracle of life. El Valle, where I'm teachable by people like you who live their lives in order to love. Because this is why many of us live our lives, but we don't stop working to notice. Pero yo ya no soy yo, ni mi casa es ya mi casa, en El Paso, en El Valle, everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmy. That was great. Go ahead, Jose.
Yeah. I like this. I love. Well, I mean, of course, who doesn't love Emmy's poetry? But my poems at least in this collection, they tend to be a little bit. I don't know. Now that I'm looking at them, right? But it's the second, third, fourth time is kind of dark. Um, this one's called Kilroy. First, the local news: young man down for spring break, gone missing. His body found days later, mutilated in Matamoros. White boys party town across the border. A new limb every day, a sacrifice of flesh to gods in exchange for invulnerability. Cartels witching immunity from bullets, even. With a cauldron and its sediment, Mark was the first American victim. A photo flashed across our afternoons on every channel, so young, like silk, so blonde. Matamoros held up on TV screens, national news, map of South Texas, map of Mexico, floating on the shoulders of men with history textbook surnames and baritone vowels, men palling with precedents, men naming the towns we knew, the places we'd driven through, bridges we'd crossed into another country.
Thank you, Jose. Such good.
Yeah, I mean, so some of us who are old enough to remember it, I remember that event happening here in the valley. Yeah, definitely a dark time. But thanks for sharing that. That was really, really great. I'd just like to remind everybody who's watching, go ahead and leave the questions in the comment area. You can also, if you got comments, we'll be popping those up on the screen as you all are leaving those. So yeah, we can go ahead and go back to Emmy.
Okay, so I read the first two pieces I read were from my book With the River on Her Face, and these are works in progress towards a new book. This one doesn't have a title yet. And these are pandemic poems. They speak of capacity as if a heart or brain is a stadium, a superdome leaking after the hurricane. If you have capacity, do you make room for kittens and paraques in the casita with your loves propped up on cinder blocks before it all launches? How do you anchor your soul when wind whips in your lungs, trumpets at rising water? And if you breathe again with capacity, is the oak still rooted? If not, do the living feel as I have, better it than me? And would we ever have the capacity to seek out the indigenous descendants of the land we own on paper America and write them into our wills decades before our deaths? Would we also pay rent now if we have the means? And if home is 100 miles and years away, before the seed of unions with another 400 miles and years, must we live with the sting of no true return back? Go back, the non-Aboriginals say, especially when back is less than a day's drive south, or when the ancestors arrived enslaved, or when the ancestors arrived Muslim, or when the ancestors arrived with another tongue they refused to understand or pronounce. And as for this liberty inked in calligraphy on old parchment or in our own skin, where do I find my place in all of this, with or without the pandemic's flames at our doorsteps?
Okay, thank you. So I know, Emmy, you didn't grow up here in the Rio Grande Valley, but you said you've been living here for 20, 30 years?
I've lived in the Texas borderlands for 20 years.
20 years.
In McAllen, 14.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Jose, you were originally from the valley?
Right. I was born in Ejido, close to Las Flores, and then I
Okay.
came with my family when I was 5 to McAllen. Yeah.
Okay. So how much of, I guess the region, I mean, living in South Texas, it's a beautiful place. I always tell people, for those who've never heard of South Texas, I tell them, come down once. Come down once. You'll see our beautiful beaches. You'll meet the people. You can cross the border. It's awesome down here. So how much influence has the living here? I guess it's influenced your writings. I mean, I guess since you've been living down here, yeah, how much of an influence is the valley and the people to your experience and your writings?
Well, I think a big influence, because I'm a very visual person and I like to write about what's going on around me at the time. I moved to the Texas borderlands 20 years ago to learn more about my family history. My mom is from El Paso, so I moved into her old neighborhood in Isleta. I moved to the valley because I had a job opportunity and I thought, wow, I can still stay in the Texas borderlands. So moving here, I thought it was going to be similar to El Paso, and it is in some ways, but it is different. And the land is just so amazingly beautiful, and the people as well. But I don't shy away also from writing about what some of the things that I see that are troublesome. And so, especially because we live in a militarized place. And so I know Jose writes about these issues as well.
Yeah, it's interesting. Emmy and I go way back to like 2006, something like that. When I grew up here, of course, and so when I was younger, I wasn't aware of the complexity of living on the borderlands. I wasn't taught Gloria and Saldu. I wasn't taught the theory of the borderlands. I wasn't, nothing about that. Bilingualism wasn't even a thing. I am of the generation where I was discouraged from being bilingual or from speaking Spanish anywhere on campus, anywhere in any school, even in the playground, any elementary school. So when I was getting ready to go away as an adult for graduate school, Emmy said, just you wait. When you leave the valley, you will see it differently. And she was so right, because it really took me leaving, for me anyway, not that everyone has to do that, but for me, it took me geographically to get away, to appreciate it in a new way, appreciate the borderlands, my upbringing, everything that I, in essence, sort of took for granted, to appreciate it in a new way. And once I did that, I think I really found the richness in the area and my experiences, and felt sort of a license to then explore it in writing. Like, this too can be literature, right?
Right, absolutely. I mean, again, yeah, for those who've never experienced the valley, I always tell everybody, everywhere that I go, for many years I was in a band, and we played everywhere, and they'd ask me, where are you from? I'm from the Rio Grande Valley, 956, McAllen. And I always inviting people, always inviting, bands, come down here, come and play. I'll show you around. You'll fall in love with the valley, and it never failed. I'd have people come by. They come down, and they're like, I can't wait to come back. So yeah, it's definitely a beautiful, beautiful place.
And there are a lot of misconceptions about it.
Oh yes, big time, big time. So okay, let's go ahead and continue. I'm not sure whose turn it was, but
Yeah, I don't. Oh, I think it was my turn. Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. This one's a little different. This one's about a trip to a trip I took, an outing I took to Harry Ransom Center at the UT Austin campus. It's of course a huge collection of like museum artifacts and stuff, and I haven't seen, of course, most of it. I don't think anybody has. It's incredibly vast, their collection. But one day they had like a small percentage of it on display, a little bit of everything that they had, and it was quite impressive. And I was just kind of really struck by it. So I wrote a poem about two items that I saw in that exhibit at the UT Austin campus. The world's first photograph, which was under, of course, behind a kind of tank of behind glass and under special chemicals to keep it preserved, and a video, a kind of behind the scenes of the movie Gone with the Wind. So it's called Still Life with a View from the Window at McGraw. That's the world's first photograph. And Gone with the Wind hair color test at Harry Ransom Center. Is this what becomes of the object that signals the future? An image more grim than grainy of shadows and stand-ins for the human form, and a wall that speaks geometry. The display drowning in a dark, cured a little by a black light. The first image trapping light on metal is now protected from it, threatened by that which it once caught and wrestled into contour. The more photographs we take, the less the mind retains in the house of memory. And the graph illustrating that proliferation of photo taking points to a future where we may forget our own faces with too many mirrored reminders. Beyond the dead blue booth is the next installation. Footage of Clark Gable and Vivian Lee in costume standing together, eyes to camera. Filmmakers seeking a match for their hair colors, finding the most compatible shades, the ones closest to their reality. Having seen the movie, I recognize them instantly, though what's most peculiar is their gaze. Scarlet and red, photographed at 24 frames per second, every image fretted over, half smiles on a loop, their hands for a second on each other's cheeks, mimicking affection.
Okay, thank you. I've never seen Gone with the Wind.
What?
I never have, and I consider myself a movie buff, but for some reason that's one of those blind spots that I have as far as films. I mean, I love classic Hollywood, foreign, but I've never seen Gone with the Wind.
Well, it's problematic, of course, because
right.
It romanticizes the South and everything about the South. But it is quite a production, right? It's just huge and epic. And what most stands out for me from the film is all her costume changes.
Her costumes.
Amazing. It's just crazy.
Yeah, so I've never watched the movie, right? But I do remember there was a skit comedy show called Carol Burnett Show, and I remember Carol Burnett coming out and these outlandish. I think she took down some drapery and she was wearing it as a dress, coming down those stairs.
Right,
So
because yeah, in the movie she does that. In the movie she tells someone, "Get make me a dress from those curtains because they're broken. The curtains is all the fabric they have." And
okay.
so then Carol Burnett took that quite literally the next step and made the dress from the curtains, but without taking the curtain rod.
Right, that's
Yeah,
the one I think I remember them just kind of jotting out there from her shoulders. Hilarious.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Let me see. Mónica Álvarez Suárez has a comment here. Bellísimas palabras. Muchas gracias, José y Emmy, por compartir su poesía. Your work is so beautiful and powerful. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.
Okay, well, let's back to Emmy.
Okay. Okay, I'm going to read a piece I also wrote during the pandemic. And hopefully you all know what a paraque is. It's a bird that lives here in the valley, but also in other places. So when I say paraque, that's a bird. Pandemic paraque. After the sun had well risen, you find a chick feather, a fluff of down in the grass outside your bedroom window. A few hours after you heard a cat growl like a fight that stopped the paraque song. You wish you'd intervened in the 5 a.m. darkness. Just before your child had a spontaneous bloody nose while sleeping and couldn't fall back asleep, there in your bed now, asking, "What's that?" When hearing the song. And you listened together, surprised by its being when you weren't otherwise going to receive the gift. And soon as a cat attacked, you distracted the child with talk of another day to come at home. And 10 minutes later, after he fell back asleep, red blotted tissues all over the floor like paper flowers comparatively, you stayed awake, as so many other times reading articles in bed on your phone, worried for people who can no longer breathe. Soon after the paraque began to call from a short distance, obviously for the missing, it wasn't a song, it was a question, and another, and another. You've never heard or seen paraques in this neighborhood, only in wildlife refuges, where some sit and blend safe in fallen leaves, along walking paths, their eyes closed in daylight. You can't imagine any paraques living long in this hood, though they must have arrived after shelter in place, like the chachalacas in the treetops and the fox caught on cameras at the nearby museum grounds. You wish you'd been awake enough to record the younger Paraque's song. You wish you sacrificed your household comfort to try and stop the cat. It may have been Mama Lulu, who showed up feral a few years ago to give birth on the porch and since neutered, or the other hood cats that also try to eat her food you share so that she stops killing birds for a living. When the parent Baraque began calling for her lost chick, she was a naive, then knowing Llorona. You recorded an audio on your phone. In this version, however, she is innocent, hunting for food when it happened. She is benevolent like Prietita in the book and will later become the ghost woman who shines brilliant light on curing herbs. But the revision doesn't comfort now, as no one knows the cure for COVID, and many cannot say goodbye from hospital sheets. And even if they did before their last breath, or before the ambulances arrived, before the Ubers arrived, the fact remains. And there are no vaccines preventing gunshot wounds that cannot be staunched with tissue paper or body cameras and witness cameras as they roll. And there are no vaccines preventing asylum-seeking drownings in the river or the lack of water itself in stretches around these militarized lands, or the childhood separations and incarcerations for poverty and hunger. When the parent Paraques calling ended, you listened to your child's breathing beside you as he slept and have not listened to the recording since.
Okay, thank you. So I have a question. So during this pandemic, I'm assuming you had some time and you were busy writing, Emmy. Is that correct?
I don't know if I was busy writing, but
No.
I've been really busy.
Right.
I think that the pandemic sort of forces us to work double time because as a teacher, we're putting everything online, and I really empathize with everybody who's been putting everything online. It takes more effort. But, I think that my usual inspirations, especially here in the Valley, are not here anymore. Like I usually go outside and see something that inspires images in my work. And so I've really had to dig deep inside of myself. And so in that poem, I was literally listening to the little chick, in my opinion, being killed by a cat. I never saw the evidence except for a little feather. And so, you have to, in these times, sort of delve into yourself and use other senses. And so I was using my ears instead of my eyes, which I usually use more of my eyes to write my poetry. So yeah, I've been writing these pieces late at night after my kids go to sleep, and then going back and revising them over and over and over again. And that one's in progress. I'll probably still tweak it before it sees publication, but
Right.
I think the pandemic makes us think of things, and we have to, as poets, like think of other ways to access our inspirations.
Right, absolutely. So let me just read a comment here we have on screen by MJ Ramirez. Emmy, thank you for your poetry that mixes English and Spanish. Gives your words so much feeling and passion.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
How about you, Jose? How's as far as the pandemic? Were you keeping busy writing, or
I'm keeping busy climbing the walls.
well, I think we all are, right?
Um, yeah, it's a challenge. It's a challenge, but yeah, certainly. I try and write whenever I have time, and that hasn't changed.
Right. Yeah, because I think as far as the pandemic, this coming year, we're gonna see a lot of art that's being derived from people being stuck at home because of the pandemic. So I think we're gonna see a lot of music come out that's dealing with the pandemic, writing, poetry, maybe even some film. I mean, I know we've already a little pop culture here, but Borat just released a new movie,
Right.
and it was being filmed during the pandemic, and it does come into play. So I think it's going to affect a lot of art that we see that's going to be coming out in the very near future, for
For
sure.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's see. We're going to bounce back to you, Jose.
Okay, well, I think I'll read a couple paragraphs from the memoir House Built on Ashes, which explores my childhood and adolescence in the Valley, and specifically in McAllen. So this is in this chapter. I'm about 19, graduated high school, and am struggling with my queerness, with being a queer man, a gay man. And I'm very much still in the closet. And at that age, the only real thing I know about sexuality is through the books that I've read, because I've read a lot, right? And libraries have become my safe space. And so then I discover, of course, the academic library at UTRGV, which has a lot more books on sexuality. And I start to connect the knowledge of sexuality as I was growing up, what limited knowledge I was given through TV and the media and stuff, with the knowledge of mathematics as I was growing up, which is based on lies, because the first teacher will tell you that there's only full numbers, and they don't tell you anything about fractions. Then the next teacher tells you actually fractions exist, but no numbers below zero. Then the next teacher, the next grade, says actually there's negative numbers. And then the next teacher, right? And so it's this sort of like recalibrating the child's mind. And so this chapter kind of draws a connection between the two. It's the same with sex. At first, the penis is only for peeing. Then it turns out, no, it's not only for peeing, it's for making babies too. but love has to be involved in it. Then it turns out love doesn't really have to be involved, but it's still mostly to have kids. So it has to be a guy and a girl together. And don't think about the other stuff. Then it's, yeah, there's other stuff, other thoughts and fantasies, but they're mostly transitory. Then when they're not transitory, it's, yeah, for some people it's not transitory, but it's different because they can't have children. So it doesn't count. And anyway, there's so few of them, you can't really see them. And besides, they're all going to get AIDS because God hates them. Also, they're not really around except in large cities. Then it turns out they may be around, except only at the edge of town and only at night and only for one thing, because that's all they are. And by the time you figure out there are others like you don't even know how to speak it, how to breathe it, because you weren't even supposed to be. For so long, you didn't even exist. I think that's why so many kids fail in math, because they so internalize the earlier rule that they can't accommodate the later one that breaks that rule. And just when they're internalizing that second rule, allowing for that exception or that new aspect of numbers and the mysterious ways in which they work, here comes another rule to break that one. Every time your heart's broken a little by the lie until all of you feels like a stress fracture. But maybe that's just me. Here's the thing. I figure every line in the universe eventually intersects. It doesn't matter whether they're parallel or on different planes, like the high school teacher said, because everything shifts. The planet rotates and orbits and turns on its axis. So all the lines traversed through the surface will intersect with the same ones made a season later. And you have to figure the sun is also turning on its own axis. So that has to shift the entire solar system. And you don't think the galaxy is shifting? So I figure when all the lines eventually intersect, when all that crossing creates a chaos no mathematician can decipher into order, when everything comes crashing into each other, is it like a black hole or a supernova? The end of a universe or the beginning? The day dawning or the day dying? The lights above the police car whirl without the siren, and it seems like a contradiction, a warning that isn't fully uttered. I wonder if there are men in there doing the thing I dream of when I let myself dream of it, if that thing they do mends the heart or further breaks it.
That was
Thank you.
great. That was great. Yay. Oh, wow. That was really good. So let me see. I just want to remind everybody we will be taking questions, and we've got quite a few already coming in. So thank you for that. We will be picking a few, and we'll do about, I would say, maybe 5 more minutes of readings, and then we'll go ahead and jump over to our question and answer part of tonight's program. So Emmy, if you want to go ahead and continue.
Okay, so this is another piece that I wrote during the pandemic that I've been sharing lately. It's called Pandemic Solstice, and I wrote it around the time of the summer solstice. We're almost like way beyond that. But recently I changed the number of dead from the pandemic in our country. So you'll hear that number. Pandemic solstice. And so we will call this home our heaven, our heaving, our harm, and our justicia. And yet we live, knowing over 200,000 plus in this country alone dead. And the George Floyd mural in Brownsville vandalized again, knowing somewhere someone is slurring the N-word and saying, go back to where you came from, as they believe their families sprouted here like corn, ever since the very seeds first grew on these plots of earth they claim banks and money own. I could write a polite sonnet, sound my words, count syllables, or I could choose to sing someone else's love song instead. I could paint my paint over the murals on my papers like a palimpsest. I could paint my pant, coat my tongue with berries and fermented varieties, and see what messes I can create. Poems can't change systems, and yet here I am refusing to believe They can't charge the synapses in my brain with some kind of minimal protest to falling asleep because dreams cannot be recorded, and sometimes the sun shines longer than the moon. This is a prelude to a protest, a prelude to mourning the voices, the appetites, the people surviving COVID, but killed by others' hands, with guns and knees, with kneelings on, and chokeholds with their laws and procedures that sanction. We'll never cease our local and global protests because we were born too soon in history's timeline, which means I have hope for the future if we can also nurture the earth while we are at it. And I truly ask if that time will ever come. Will that time ever come? When will that time arrive for everyone?
Thank you for that, Emmy. Jose, why don't we go ahead and just do one more, and then we'll go ahead and jump over to some questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll do something brief here towards the end. Antarctica. I'm waiting for the screen's talking heads, cheeks red and engorged, to stop bobbing, to quiet until only mute faces linger, unblinking and quenched. I'm waiting, I think, for the world to empty of words, like one of those lakes in Antarctica that develops a crevice in its belly and dissolves in hours, a lake older than mountains, rushing to the great center, that imagined place, leaving behind the form of its absence.
Okay, thank you, Jose. So thank you. Thank you both. And we're going to be taking a couple questions that will be popping up on the screen here as we... Okay, here we go. So first question is from Valeria Luna. How has your writing changed since you started writing poetry? And that can go to whoever wants to answer it.
Please, Emmy.
Okay. Well, I think I started writing poetry as a child, I think, what I thought was poetry at the time. And I think that my writing has changed always by poetry because it didn't follow the rules. And I think that as young people, we're always taught this is how you write an academic essay, have a thesis statement, everything needs to make sense. But I think with poetry, it was just really a beautiful way to express how I was feeling. And it really, as a young person, when I wrote it, I didn't write it very often. I didn't have any instruction. It just helped me feel better. And I think that that's something that I continue to do to this day. I mean, even though now that I have learned some techniques, I feel like I'm always rebelling with poetry. Even when I write an essay now, I call it like a lyric essay. A poem and an essay had a baby. And that's the only way that I can write an essay is if it sounds like a poem. And so, yeah, I don't know if Jose wants to share anything.
I think the content of my writing has remained fairly constant. It's very autobiographical and poetry of witness, and I'm writing about the world around me, but it's through my lens, of course, my point of view. What has changed is that as I grow older and I learn more about society and the structures and the systems that govern it and the pressure on the individual, then the experiences that I write about, whether they're mine or somebody else's, I'm more aware of how they might be related to larger social forces, and I'm always looking for ways to address that or incorporate that into the poetry.
Okay, thanks. I like your comment, Emmy, about rebelling through poetry. Yeah, that's it rings true to me only because through my music, even when our music seems to really not be about anything major. It's very personal, and it's always been my way of like rebelling against all the forces that are work against me. So when you said that, it really spoke to me. So thank you.
I hope you're still making music.
Not as much. I have a baby. She's 1.5 years, so it's a little tough right now, but it's definitely something I plan to continue, hopefully doing in the near future for
Wonderful.
sure.
It's a beautiful way to live life, to be able to
Yes.
have like some kind of artistic outlet, whatever it is, music, poetry. Some people are beautiful cooks. Some people crochet beautiful things. I think whatever we choose really helps us to live a beautiful life and to reflect on our life and express how we feel. We can't always do
Definitely.
that in our daily jobs or even in our daily lives. And that's really like beautiful time to spend with ourselves and to wonder how do we feel. We don't really know until we explore it, I think, sometimes through the art.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like I said, my first time being a dad, and I created this little life. But the way I see my music is, or whatever other things that I create, they're my creations that I leave to the world, and hopefully um, give people some sort of purpose or entertainment or meaning. And I hopefully I'm leaving a lot behind, not just for the world, but for her as well. So that's really cool. We have a second question here from Rolando Ramirez. What perspective has living away from the border area given you?
Um, well, the uniqueness of it, it was interesting. When I was in graduate school, I went to the state of New York, upstate New York, not New York City, but north of New York City, to study, and encountering my classmates, the vast majority of them who had not been to the U.S.-Mexico border. I think there maybe was one classmate who was from Corpus, and so she had an idea, but everyone else didn't. And when I would mention, just talk about the border, several things would just kind of like surprise them, and it began to that also helped me to begin to see how special or unique it was. For example, I would comment to my classmates that most people in South Texas can jump between two languages in the same sentence. And that blew their minds, most of my classmates. Or that I was 15 minutes away from the Mexican border, and that blew their minds. Um, some of them knew we're close to the Canadian border, but that's not quite the same thing. I've been there. It's very different than the U.S.-Mexico border. So when I would tell them about how militarized it was, with dogs and men with guns, that blew their minds as well. Which, it was just what I grew up with, right? Stuff like
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely. I think a lot of people, like you mentioned, that I believe you said earlier, have a lot of misconceptions about what it is like living in the valley or, along the border. And one thing I think a lot of people who aren't from the area don't realize, especially, and this was true maybe a few years ago, not so much now, but just how fluid it is. People would travel back and forth. You would go over there for shopping or dinner, and it was no big deal. It's what people did. You'd go over there to work. People from over there would come over here. And when you would tell people that, they're like, oh, is it really that easy? Is it really just? And I was like, yeah, I mean, it's like, it's the city right next to us. I mean, why not? Why wouldn't we go back and forth?
that.
So I think now with what's going on, unfortunately, it's not so easy. But yeah, that's definitely one of the big misconceptions
For
I think
sure,
people
yeah.
have. Yeah.
Yeah, because humanity is way older than political borders.
Oh,
And
yeah, for
human
sure.
in us resists the absolutism or the totality of political borders. And so a lot of people, right, they don't understand that. They think our lives end where America ends,
Yep.
right? And that's not how humans are.
And I
Yeah.
also think people don't think that the valley is as big as it is and populated it. I think they think it's like, like a couple of shacks in the desert or something. I mean, just based on some of my travels and talking to people, they don't really realize that it's such a vibrant place with so many people. And we have like all the same stuff as everywhere else in capitalist America,
Yeah.
for better and for worse. But also the benefit of having the other side with relatives in Mexico and just the beauty of it all. And so I love all these comments you're making.
Okay, so let's see. We have a question here from Nicole January Peña. She asks, what is your writing process like?
Emmy?
Oh, okay. So I really believe in writing fast And I used to write really slow when I was writing poems and trying to like be very careful in how I crafted it and how it sounded and to fashion my lines. And I was very deliberate. But now I've, in the past, like maybe, gosh, 10 or more years, just writing fast and free writing, letting it all get out and then going back and crafting it. And sometimes it's just junk, but I feel better. And so I have, all of these writings that will never become a poem for a book or anything like that. But it doesn't matter to me because it's a beautiful way to live a life. And so, but when I do go back and craft the work and I revise it, that's like another beautiful experience of, really like zoning in on a line and trying to craft an image or the way something sounds. And that's just a different process. And so that's my process.
Yeah, for me, I write fast and I keep a journal, and then I write a batch of poems, for example, and then I let them rest for weeks, and then I come back to them. But during those weeks, I'm writing new stuff, you know. And then I that batch of poems that I come back to a few weeks later, I revise and then put them away again. And then weeks later, I come back to them again. And eventually, I'll arrive at something that feels polished or polished enough.
Is that like, I'm not a poet here. I've written music, lyrics, but when you say you feel like this is it, do you ever really feel like it's really done? Or do you ever just, it's never ever going to be done, but at some point you just got to let it go or you're never going to put it out?
Exactly. Poems aren't, who said it? Do you remember, Emmy? Poems aren't ever finished, they're only abandoned.
Yes. I don't know who said it, but I know the quote.
If anyone can figure out who said it, leave it in the comments below.
Google it. Somebody help us out.
Okay, so I believe we have one more question here. Let's see. So this is a question from our library director, Kate Horan. Hello, Kate. What advice do you have for young poets struggling with the pandemic and their own personal issues?
Well, of course, as a writer, I'm going to say to write, even if it hurts to do so, because swallowing our pain is not very healthy for us. And if we live in a house that's small or a space that's small and we're surrounded by other people, it's really hard to be able to open up to everybody that we live with. And so, having that writing space, even if it's just 5 minutes a day, and it doesn't have to be a poem, just write it all out. Even before bed, that's what I do. That's the time I have. I feel so much better. It's like getting it out on the paper does something. And sometimes people feel worse. But to me, that just means we need to revisit that piece again because 5 minutes isn't enough and continue writing about that. And other people have different outlets. That's my advice. And just to trust that your anxiety, if you're feeling it, is felt by so many of us. We all feel it, and that just believe that, and when you're staying home, you're saving other people's lives, and that's worth it. Even though it's so hard to do so, I know how hard it is, and I think we just can be patient and write or do whatever it takes for us to be able to express ourselves and not bottle it up inside.
And to add on to what Emmy's great words, great advice is to find community. It's harder to do it now because the social distancing, but because through media and stuff, do find community, reach out, keep in touch, stay in touch, share your writing, email it to each other or send it to the cloud or however it is that young people do it nowadays. Reach out, read each other's work because it'll be a evidence of the fact that you're not alone in your struggles. And that's always helpful because one thing that anxiety and depression does and other issues is that they tend to make us feel like we're the only ones living through them, right? There's a sense of isolation, greater isolation and loneliness. And when you share each other's writing, when you hear somebody else's expressions of whatever it is they feel, they're always inevitably, it creates a sense of community, a sense of connection.
Okay, great advice. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and wrap things up here. Of course, I'd like to thank everybody who was involved in putting tonight's program together. I want to give a special shout out to Rudy back over there in the control room, making sure everything runs smoothly. All the technical issues are working. So thank you, Rudy. And of course, I want to thank Emmy and Jose. Thank you for taking time out to be with us tonight. We really appreciate it. We loved hearing your work, and yeah, big thank you for sure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And everybody vote, please, and Black Lives Matter.
Yes,
all of that.
Word.
And of course, I want to thank everybody who tuned in tonight. We are still live on Facebook and our YouTube channel. So I'd like to remind everybody, make sure you subscribe to our Facebook, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we do have more programming coming up this entire weekend, really. So let me just kind of go over that real quick, and I believe we're going to play some promo at the end. For those who want to stick around, we'll give you a lot more detail about what we have coming up for the festival. So
thank
let
you,
me
Bobby,
see.
and thank you, everyone.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you, Emmy. Thank you, Jose. So tomorrow we will be joined by Adrian Bankert, who's the author of Your Hidden Superpower, the kindness that makes you unbeatable at work and connects you with anyone. And that'll be streaming tomorrow at 7. And then it continues on Saturday, Halloween. And we're going to have a whole day of events starting at, 11 a.m. That'll be our booktacular author lineup. I'll just kind of quickly read what authors we have for Saturday. We'll have Carmen Oliver, Natalia Sylvester, John O'Brien, who's a magician, who'll be doing some magic, Sadi Faruqi. We'll be joined by David Bowles and Adriana Cuevas, Raul III, and RJ Palacio. And then at 5 p.m., we'll have a special send-off from our library director, Kate Horan. So that's on Saturday. And the last day, which will be Sunday, November 1st, we're going to have a drive-in movie night here at the library parking lot. And we will be showing the movie Wonder, which is based on the book by RJ Palacio. And that'll be, at 7 o'clock. And we invited everybody, families, to join us. You can register online, and we'll have a link down in the comments. But for all of this information, go ahead and head over to southtexasbookfestival.com or head over to our Facebook page, where you'll find a lot more details about what we have lined up for the South Texas Book Festival. And okay, well, that's it. We're wrapping it up. Thank you once again, Emmy and Jose. It was awesome. Yeah, until next time, we'll see everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.